Okay, um, time for another quiz one breakdown. This one will be Cooper's class for spring 17. So go ahead and look for display street repair. This look for the display street repair class, the repair class, and the address class. So this quiz has three classes. Um, when I was preparing for this quiz, I thought this one was a really good one to do. Even though it was more recent, I kind of like going back into some later, like some that were a few years ago, quizzes from a few years ago. But I wasn't really finding anything that honestly was too relevant to what I actually experienced taking Java. But this one here um, is really good. First of all, because I think it's the only one that I've even done for quiz one that has three classes. But just even the logic that goes behind this one, because as you know, as some of y'all might have heard, Cooper does make his quizzes a little bit more tedious. Um, and when I look at this one, usually what's going on in most quiz ones, is you have second those second classes do a lot of the work, I guess you could say. Um, but this one, honestly, it's all going on in the main class. And what I mean by that is usually it's the second classes that are going to display things or that you're going to call on to perform the output. But in this case, um, the main class is what's going to do the output. It's what's going to do the actual terminal. I mean, it's not a big difference, but the way the logic is set up is that the second and the third class is really going to be what you want to get correct in order to get this first class working correctly. I mean, it all works that way, but as we get into it, hopefully you'll see what the thinking or the logic is behind this program here. So yeah, let's go ahead and start getting into it. I'm trying to think of other things that I might want to mention. I can't really think of anything, so hope maybe along the way I'll think of some stuff. But we'll go over um, the notes I usually take at the beginning of these quizzes. All right, so the main class is actually what he describes as class 3. So um, if you read along in the quiz, class 3 says there's no attributes, there's only one method, and it performs all these functions. Well, it turns out that this is actually your main method. Class 3 is your main method. Um, so for this class, it performs the following. It creates an object of class 1, creates an object of class 2. The object of class 2 calls a method in class 2 and passes it in class. All right. The fourth step is it creates another object of class 2, calls a method in class 2 and passes it another address, this one here. And then it says using the data from the object in class 1, it displays the type of street repair required. Okay. So I'm gonna break this down here to test your programming skills for sure, because this one is pretty difficult in my opinion. Oh, it's not difficult. It's just the logic is structured very. It's the logic here is very interesting. So don't pass it anything, and we are going to display the type of street repair required. So street repair is going to enter. Okay, that's all this one is saying. I'm thinking, okay, so I need to somehow use this object of class 1 to call the type of street repair. My syntax is going to be um, object name dot object. Yeah, I'm thinking, okay, to call some method that's going to return me that street repair. Okay, and usually I know I don't go that deep into detail on these quizzes. Um, understanding that the main method is giving you that terminal box, and it's giving you that terminal box um, in a certain format. Like he tells you, he gives you a note. Notice the line spacing here, which I'm guessing he's like, all right, notice that every single one of these sentences is on a new line. Another thing that I'm noticing is that just because I have a little bit more experience, like I can tell there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of data that you are going to call through methods and objects. So uneven lanes in that black terminal box, you're going to have to call. The address you're going to have to call. The second address you're going to have to call. The true you're not going to have to call, but the way you get that true is using a Boolean statement, and we'll get into that further. Okay, but this is the breakdown for this. And then this step says you call a method in class 2 to display street address. So you're going to call a method. Hopefully most of you guys are comfortable with that. If not, go check out more of the quiz 1 tutorials so that you can see what calling a method is comprised of. And then the last piece is using data from object of class 1. It displays if the street repair is inside or outside of the city. So again, I'm going to break this last piece down, and basically what it's saying, that object that you created of class 1 holds some information that you need, and that piece of information is going to be the indicator of whether or not this thing is inside or outside of the city. So I think here you're going to have to do object name dot some other method, and it's going to return you that value. Okay, and honestly, like I haven't even looked at the key. I'm just writing out my notes, and I'm going towards my own logic. So if these things are wrong, which I don't think they are, because I really wouldn't know how else you would do something like that. Well, I know how else you would do it, but from my experience of the class, this was a very common piece of code. But so yeah, that's what I'm thinking. This sentence here, when you read the quiz, sounds so tricky. It sounds so annoying, honestly, to read it. But this is all it is saying is, hey, that object you created of class 1, we need information from it. How are you going to get it? That's all it's saying. So don't confuse yourself. Don't look into it that much. So moving on to class 1. So we started from class 3. Sorry, kind of going backwards. Actually, we'll go to class 2. We'll kind of descend from there. Class 2 has one attribute. It holds a street address. I can never spell correctly. It holds a street address, so we know it's some string. It only has one method. Oh, sorry. It has two methods, first and second method. First method receives a street address, assigns it to the attribute. Second method displays the street address. So this is a system out print, and this is a method that receives the street address and assigns it to my attribute. So this is attribute equals variable that I receive, and that's all that is right there. Okay, and so now we move into class 1, and class 1 is two attributes: a string constant indicating the type of street repair. So you're gonna have some constant attribute, and it's a string. And then the second attribute is an integer that can be 1 or 0. Hint: if it's 1, that means you're gonna have a true output. If it's 0, that means you're gonna have a false output. No if or switch statements. Okay, and I'm condensing this quiz. I'm not gonna read it word for word. I'm just condensing it really quickly so that I can get through it in a timely manner. So then the first constructor method, it asks the user for a street. It asks the user to enter the type of street repair. enter type of street repair, and it stores it in the first attribute. So then it's going to be first attribute equals a J option pane. Okay. Hope I didn't lose any of you guys there, but basically this is saying, hey, you're going to ask the user for an input. That input that you get, you're going to store it into this first attribute. So that means I'm going to get this first attribute, and I have to set it equal to my J option pane that receives that input. All right. So hopefully that makes sense to some of you guys. Let me put that in square brackets. Okay. Second piece of the first constructor method. It asks the user to indicate if repair is inside or outside of the city. Okay, so if we know that the second attribute is supposed to represent a number 1 or 0, it tells you here that this number that they enter is going to be either 1 or 0. So if this is going to be 1 or 0 and this is asking for 1 or 0, this should be kind of like a little sign that's like, oh, okay, so this I'm going to set it equal to my second attribute. So second attribute equals another J option pane. All right. And then it says include any other methods. All right. So I think that starting with the second and the first class is the easiest, just because here you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot with things that are in these classes. Okay, it would be extremely difficult to start here. Not extremely difficult if you've gotten the hang of how this stuff works, but even then, this can mess you up really quickly, because here you have to call a lot of things from these two classes, and if you're calling things that you haven't created yet here, and you're gonna call a lot, like maybe 2 or 3 different methods. If you're gonna be calling a whole bunch of things here that really live in repair and address, there's a high possibility that you will misname something in these classes, and then here you have a different name for that method you're trying to call, and then your program doesn't work because the method you called doesn't really belong in repair or address. It's, you probably misnamed it or something. So it would be really easy to get confused if you started here, so I would definitely start in classes 1 or 2. I'm going to start with 2 because this one is super intuitive. It's just very, very straightforward. Okay, so you have one attribute, and now I'm gonna look at the key, because I'm gonna stick to the same variable names they have, except when I use the this method. I don't use the this method. So so it says we have one attribute. It's gonna be a street address. They tell you that these are the street addresses you're going to be passing, and it has a number and then it has letters. You're going to receive it as a string. I can see how someone could get confused by this and be like, wait, how am I supposed to receive that street address? Do I receive it as an integer? Do I receive it as a string? Receive it as a string, because you got words and letters there. So if you're sending something and you're receiving it, and what you're receiving is words and letters all together, take it in as a string. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say our attribute is a private string, and we're going to call it address. And that's our first step. So boom, we already got the first attribute taken care of. The first method, so we have a method. The first method receives the street address and assigns it to this attribute that we just created. So what they call it here is public void assign street address, and you want to receive an address from somewhere. And if you really this is why it's really helpful to write these notes out. I strongly encourage it because it's telling you that you're passing this address here to something in this program. So here you kind of have to make that connection and be like, oh, okay, this is the method. Assigned street address is the method that is going to receive this thing. Okay, so um, so yeah, that's pretty much that. That should be the connection that you make. Sorry, I kind of blanked out there for a second. Um, in class 3, in your main class, it tells you you're going to be using an object and you're going to call a method in class 2. This is class 2. And you're going to pass it this street address. So here you're like, okay, this is the method that's going to receive it. So string, and I'm going to call it street address. I think I spelled that right. Yeah. Okay. So we received the address, and now we have to assign it to the attribute. So then we're going to say address equals street address. And you are done with this step. Okay. Then the second method displays the street address. So we pointed out there that it's a system out print line. So they named this public void display street address. We don't receive anything, so we don't have to worry about anything in the parentheses. And we say system out print ln street address. Oh, I'm sorry. We say system out print address. Okay. Semicolon. All right. And boom, that's it. That was it for class 1. So this one was very simple to start with. So just to understand what this program is doing, I mean this class is doing, we have this class called address. We have one attribute in this class called address, and we have a method that receives an address from our main class, and we're sending it here. So we have this method that receives it. This method, the function of this method is to assign the thing it receives to the attribute. And then the second method, all it does is perform a very simple system out print line. Okay, that is as straightforward as it is. There's really nothing to that. And so now I feel like moving on to class 1 is the best step. And then this class is just going to make it a whole lot easier to perform what class 3 needs to have. All right, so we have 2 attributes, a string constant indicating a type of street repair. All right. And so we'll say private, is it final? Yeah, final string, and they call this repair type. Okay. So this is, why am I getting a red line here? Private final string repair type. Should be fine. Don't know why it's not. Private final string. This is bothering me. Why is it red? Okay, whatever. So this is the syntax to declare a final attribute. So you can do private final data type, and then this is the proper way to, like, you don't have to make it all caps, but it's good programming style to make it all caps, because when you pass that variable around or you represent it somewhere else, people know, oh, okay, this variable is constant, so it's never going to change value. If you make it lowercase, I have a feeling though I'm have a feeling that they'll take off points, but just keep this in mind that this is the proper syntax to declare a final or a constant attribute. And if you were to declare like a I'm going to do this over here. If you were to declare a final variable, I believe it should be we're about to test it out. Final string var equals le. Yeah, so that's how you would just declare a variable. Now the only difference is we're doing it for an attribute, so you're gonna throw in that private in there. So that's it for this one. And then it says the second attribute is an integer that can be 1 or 0. So you're gonna do private. This one's kind of interesting because usually Cooper will indicate on his quizzes, like right now he says this attribute can be either 1 or 0, and he'll be like it'll never exceed this number. Usually that's what his quizzes say. This one doesn't say that, but he makes it a data type byte, and then he calls it inside city code. And I can see why he didn't explicitly say this number will not be greater than 1 or 0. But his hint is basically it's either 1 or 0. It'll never be anything else. So make it a byte because 1 or 0 are not big numbers. Byte is a perfect data type to store that type of value. So yeah, a little bit of the tedious stuff about Java coming in right there, just because it's not straightforward to make this a byte. But hopefully, if you're in Cooper's class, ask questions about that and see whether how hard he's going to be on the data type stuff, and ask him like how do we know when to use certain data types, But like I've said in many of my other quiz reviews, use your cheat sheet and put your data types on there. So that's it for this second attribute. And one more thing I kind of want to add. Someone might get confused and be like, what? Like this thing can be 1 or 0, so I'm going to do 1 or 0. And that's completely wrong. Or they're going to do 1 private by other code equals, like, nah, don't, all it's telling you, remember that attributes are like variables. They're variables because you're allowing flexibility and fluidity for what these variables might represent. So in the problem, it says this thing is going to be either 1 or 0. But right there, you should kind of look at these visuals, and right here it says enter the type of street repair, and the user is inputting uneven lanes. The second visual is enter 1 for inside the city. Enter 1 for inside the city, otherwise enter 0. So it should kind of be letting you know, like, oh, okay, this attribute inside city code is going to be determined on that second input box. So all you need to do is just create a regular attribute that can hold whatever value that user inputs. Okay. And so moving on from that, we have the first constructor, and we're not receiving anything there. It says the first constructor asks the user to enter the type of street repair, stores it in the first attribute. And here we say first attribute equals a J option pane statement. Oh man, I cannot spell. All right, so our first attribute is repair underscore type. All right, and we're going to do J option pane show input dialog No, and then what do we ask? We say enter type of street repair. Okay, so that's that first. What's going on here, buddy? Oh man, player slip up. Import Java X dot swing dot star. Forgot all about that, folks. Yeah, don't forget this statement up here. It's crucial because obviously, as you saw, then that doesn't work. All right, so this takes care of this. All right, and just to recap, we want to set that input that you see in the visual, that uneven lanes, equal to our repair type. So uneven lanes is going to be represented by our repair type. So what we need to do is we need to set this attribute equal to that J option pane. All right, and so then the second step of this constructor method is to ask the user to indicate if the repair is inside or outside of the city. 1 equals inside, 0 equals outside, and here we kind of lay the format down again. So we get that second attribute inside city code. And you must remember that this data type is a byte, so you have to parse it. And our message there says enter Juan for inside the city, otherwise enter Zippo. And you are good money. All right, so recapping this line, this is the second input dialog box, and we need to parse this because we want to set this input equal to inside city code. If we don't parse it, we get an error because it's saying inside city code is a byte. Set it equal to a string that the user just inputted. Okay, but now we put byte parse byte, and so now what the code is saying, inside city code is a byte. This attribute is going to be set equal to something that just got made into a byte through this J option pane. So that's all that's saying there, and we are done with that constructor. Okie dokie. So now this infamous include any other method statement comes up. All right. Okay. This is, I mean, I don't want to say it, but anytime they're saying include any other statements, it means that you're going to have to return some stuff. So you need return methods or methods that are performing returns. That isn't always the case. You can't rely on it, but from my experience in the class, it always meant that you're going to be returning something. Okay, there was just like 1 or 2 exceptions where you weren't returning anything. So if you remember that it says for class, oh man, was this class 1 or class 2? Let me check. Class 1 has only 2 attributes. Yeah, so this was class 1. Let's see what it's referencing in class 1. Using data from class 1, it displays the type of street repair required. All right. So object of class 2 calls method in class 2 and passes in an address. Create second object of class 2 calls method in class 2 and passes it. Okay. So here explicitly, when it's describing class 3, it's saying that you're using data. I guess I should keep the descriptions of the classes up here. Class 1. Class 2. B. Okay. using data from the object in class 1, it displays the type of street repair required. And we said that we need object name dot sum method to get that street repair that is required. And if we look at class 1, repair type is the thing that is holding that street repair. Repair type represents uneven lanes, and we want to get back uneven lanes, right? But if we break down this piece of code here, import JavaX swing doesn't return that repair type thing. Public class repair doesn't do that for us. This is just an attribute. This is just an attribute. And this is just a constructor. This constructor is just performing functions for when I create an object of this class. So here, what this does is just set that input equal to my attribute, and it's the same thing here. Yet in class 3, they're telling me, hey, class 1 has data we need. Get that data for us. So that should be an indication to you that you're going to have to create return methods in this class because you need to send back the repair type. So the way they do that, and that is what is meant by include any other methods. So really what I just broke down there should kind of be the logic. That should be your logic when taking these quizzes, because that can be very confusing and very vague for someone just to put on a quiz, include any other methods. But once you really understand the dynamics of the program, some of this stuff should kind of come intuitive to you, because all it did was tell you to do all these things very explicitly. Okay? And here it's telling you explicitly that you need to get some of the things from here. But when they're describing class 1, they don't tell you how to get those things back. So you have to think to yourself as a programmer and think, okay, there's stuff in here that class 3 needs. How am I going to get it over there? Well, you do that through returning it. So we are going to create a method. They go ahead and call this method, and we need to return the repair type in the city code. We need to return both of these things, all right? Because I think it shows you here. Yeah, okay. Using data from object 1, using data from the object of class 1, it displays the type of street repair required. Okay, we need the repair type. Using data from object of class 1, it displays if the street repair is inside or outside of the city. This indicates whether we are inside or outside of the city. The number 1 or the number 0 indicates whether it's inside or outside, right? So we need to return both of those things. So we're going to name some methods. We're going to create some methods that are going to return it. We need to return a byte for the city code, and we call this method return inside city code. Again, folks, the names do not matter. I can call this get inside city code, holla at the city code, invent, where is the, I don't know, whatever. It's random names, okay? Because I know I'm gonna get that question a lot this semester. How do I know return, set, get, whatever? But trust me, it doesn't matter. Method names are random, so you can call them whatever you want. Okay, so public byte return inside city code, and we need to return the attribute that has the city code. So inside city code would be what you return. Now we need to do the same thing for the repair type, and the way you would do that is public string return repair type. Same concept. Name doesn't matter for the method, it matters what it does. I need to return that repair type, so we return repair type. And that's it. That is it for including any other methods, because you need to look at the program and see, okay, this is what they told me to do up here. Am I going to need this somewhere else? Yes, I'm gonna need it in class 3. Okay, so let me write out methods that return some of this data that I'm getting, that I'm creating here. All right. This one can be confusing because, people are like, I'm returning a final. Do I do public final string to let it to make sure that it's returning it? And see, look, you could do that. Look, there's no error. But guess what? This final isn't referring to your data type. It's referring to the method. What it's saying is this method will never change. And it could be true. This method could never change, but that they're not asking you to do that. So I don't know if they'll mark off. I'm pretty sure your code will still work, but it might cause errors if this program, um, I don't know. I just know they're not asking you to do that, so don't do it. Or someone might think, okay, repair type is the final, so do I return final repair type? And see, there it gives you an error. So don't get too caught up on that. All you need to know is that you need to return this attribute. So, just return the attribute. Don't get confused just because it's a constant or anything like that. All right. So that was that for class 2 and class 1. I keep deleting it like an idiot. I should stop that. Now we can execute the main class. All right. And so the first step of the main class is to create an object of class 1. Class 1 is repair. So if you're like, oh, that's easy, that should be repair first. What do they call it? Oh, shoot. They call it repair type. Repair type equals new repair. So if you were thinking, okay, that's easy, that's the piece of code that I need to create an object of class 1, then boom, you're ahead of the game, you know what you're doing. Then it says it creates an object of class 2. In class 2, the name is address, so address, and they call this first address equals new address. Okay. Easy. Simple, very straightforward. Now, the next step, object of class 2 calls method in class 2 and passes it an address 987 Bleecker Boulevard. All right. Object of class 2. So far, the only object I have of class 2 is first address. Okay? So it's referring to first address. And then it says, the object of class 2 calls a method in class 2 and passes it an address of 987 Bleecker Boulevard. So it's saying, use first address, call the method in the second class, and pass it the address 987 Bleecker Boulevard. That's all it was saying there. Okay. Object of class 2, object of class 2. Call the method in class 2 and pass it the address. This is the method that you want to call that is able to receive an address. So it's saying, okay, what it's saying is you're creating the object, right? You're creating a very generic object of address. And one thing to notice here, which is very important that I just noticed, there is no address constructor in address. And that might throw some of you guys off, and it makes completely sense if it makes complete sense if it throws you off, because you're like, what the heck? There's no constructor that matches this. Well, note that this is a default generic constructor that happens anytime you create a class. Okay? And anything that happens in this instance, and this is the instance, anything that happens in relation to this object or instance will will be anything that happens in this object or instance will be saved and specific to this instance. So for this example, we just create the object. Here we just create it. All we do is create an object. Here we use first address to call a method in class 2. The method, we pass a string to that method. When we pass that string, the string that we passed is now information that is stored in first address. So I'm breaking it down pretty heavily right there. What the heck? So basically all I'm saying there is when we pass 987 Bleecker Boulevard using this method by using the object, 987 Bleecker Boulevard now belongs to first address. First address contains 987 Bleecker Boulevard. Okay, because here you just create the object. The way I think about it is you're creating the container. You're saying, okay, first address has been created. I am now set up to put information inside this object or this container, right? Object is probably the more appropriate term, but so we'll go with object. So that's all you do in this step is you just create it. The second step is saying, okay, that object we created, go to the class where you belong, because first address was created in the address class, and this method belongs there. So it's like using the object that we just created in the second class, use it to call a method in the second class which assigns this 987 Bleecker Boulevard to an attribute, right? So here we go to assign street address, we send that string. In class 3 we're sending that string. Here we are receiving it, and then here we actually set it to the attribute of the class. So now first address holds the attribute of 987 Bleecker Boulevard. So any time that you want to get this back, you have to use first address, because first address is what holds 987 Bleecker Boulevard. Hope that makes sense. Don't want to get too deep into it, but that's the basic idea. I don't want to keep explaining it and confuse or lose some people. So then it says creates a second object of class 2. So we're going to create a second object of class 2, and they call it second address. Creates an object of class 2. It calls a method in class 2 and passes it an address. So the same idea. We create, all we do is create an object. And now we're going to use the object we created to, what did I do wrong? And we are going to send it that address that we have been told to send. So we create the object of class 2, the second object of class 2, and then using that object we call the method that allows us to assign this address to the attribute. So now second address has the information, this street address. So now it has a second address holds this street address here, the Shasta Drive one. So it's the same idea as this piece here. So now we're done with that. And then it says using data from the object of class 1, it displays the type of street repair required. All right. So now here we're actually, keyword there is displays. So we need to display something. So that should, kind of be a hint that, hey, we need to, display this terminal box. So here up to this point, now we display the terminal box. All right. And so you want to use the data from object 1. I mean, from the object of class 1. And this is the only one that we have. It's the only object. We have 2 objects of class 2, and this is the only object of class 1. All right, so using the object from class 1, we need to display the repair type. But now we're in the terminal, so we should start this out with the system out print ln. Okay, and we want to get uneven lanes back, right? Because if we look at that terminal, it says uneven lanes need to be repaired. So if I want to get uneven lanes, how would I do that? You would do it through the object that contains that information, because the way the logic of our program is working right now is this. This is our first step in our main method. Remember, the main method is the brain of the program, nothing in the main method. If it's not in the main method, it's not going to execute, it's not going to display. So the first step is to create an object for repair, and we're going to call that object repair type. So when the program reads this piece of code, it goes to the class repair, and it just like, it does all this. Maybe not the return statements. It does this. It doesn't do the return statements. But it does this. And I'm sorry, let me take that back. Apologize. When you create this object, it does take in all of this. Okay, so repair type has access to all these things here. All right, and when you create this object, you perform all of these things too. So you create it, and you're gonna prompt the user for that input of street repair, and that uneven lanes is in repair type, and you are now at the display part of the program, and you want that repair type. So the thing that holds that information is the object repair type, and you're gonna refer to the object, and you're gonna say repair type. I want to get the repair type back. And here you can even say it's telling you, hey, you probably want this, right? I mean, that's just, I don't know, the program just knows what methods belong to this. The Eclipse software that I'm using knows that repair type has access to this this method, return repair type, and then return inside city code. So I need the repair type back. So right there with that piece of code, I'm getting back uneven lanes, and then it says need to be repaired. What did I do wrong here? No semicolon. Yep, no semicolon needed there. My mistake. So right here, what you get back is, in that system outline, you get uneven lanes need to be repaired. I'm gonna add a space there. If I didn't add that space there, then you would get this. But so yeah, Java is very tedious that way. You need to add that space right there. Okay. And then Cooper does a break. So he does /n/n addresses where repairs are required. So basically he does this. He doesn't make yeah, he does. He says needs to be repaired plus new line, That's what that means. I think I did that wrong. Yeah. Backwards or forwards. I don't know. Whatever. He says new line, addresses where repairs are needed. There's two ways you could do this. So you could do it like this, or you can do it like this: system out print ln repair type dot return repair type plus need to be repaired, and then you close it out, and then you do another system dot out print ln, and then you do addresses where repairs are needed. You could have done it that way too. Yeah, you could have done it that way. But that's how he has it. I guess it's probably better programming. It is better programming to do it all in one system out print line, because instead of doing system out print ln again, all you do is do /n/n. So you literally press the keyboard 4 times right here, and then if you decide to do it on another system out print line, like just right there, typing out system out dot print ln parentheses open quote, like, yeah, you know, you pretty much just added more work and more typing for yourself. And like you've probably heard already, programmers are lazy, so if they can find a shortcut, they'll take that any day. And I completely agree with that logic. So but it's always just good to know different ways you could do it. So you could do it that way too and get the same outcome. Okay, so then we take care of that those first 2 lines in that terminal box, and now we need the actual addresses. All right. So if you remember, like I was saying just a couple minutes ago, 987 Bleecker Boulevard belongs to first address. Shasta Drive belongs to second address. And now you're at the part of the terminal box where you need to list out those addresses. So where do those addresses belong in second address? And you want to display them, you want to display them in that terminal box. And in class 2, you actually made a method that displays the addresses. So here you have this display street address method, and it does a system out print line with the attribute address. So we want the first address. So first address dot display second address dot. So right here I'm gonna get 987 Bleecker Boulevard, and here I'm gonna get 12189 Shasta Drive. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you guys, because here I spent a lengthy amount of time explaining that when you create these empty objects, here you actually take the object, you use the method to assign this specific thing to the attribute that belongs in this class, and then since you're doing that through the object of the second class, this now belongs to this object. So here in class 2, you have this method called DisplayStreetAddress that performs the system out print line, and it's using the address attribute. All this piece of code is saying is, for this object called first address, perform this display street address. It's going to do that, but it's going to say, okay, but we're going to use the attribute. All right, that's completely fine, because the attribute for first address is this, because you set this equal to the attribute. So I hope that kind of connects the dots for you guys, because that's where this quiz gets very, very mechanical. Like, you need to know how this thing is working, because when you're at this piece of code here, you pass that address to this class 2, but you're passing it through the object. You're using the object to pass that. So since you're using the object, you're going to receive that address, and that object is going to correspond to this attribute. So now 987 belongs to first address. So I'm going to use first address. I'm going to call that method through first address. I'm going to call that method through first address, and that'll perform and give me the output of this, because this is a system, that's a system out print line. And that system out print line is using that attribute that belongs to this method. You know, so in a way, it's like, use this object called first address. Use this object called first address. Perform the method display street address. Perform the method display street address according to the info stored in first address. So that's all that's saying. Perform this method with whatever information is in there. That's all. That's all. So that's how you get those 2 addresses in the terminal box. And then it says repairs are inside the city is the next one. So now we need another system out print line, and we say repairs are inside the city, colon, right? And this is where it gets interesting. You get a value of true or false in that black box, and throughout the quiz he gave you hints about that true value, and the hint goes like this. Hint: this display of true, which is after the line repairs are inside the city, this display of true is the result of a Boolean comparison of the number 1 to the inside the city value entered by the user. Since both values are 1, true is displayed. If the user had entered a value of 0, false would have been displayed. You may not use switch and if statements or whatever. Okay, so it's basically saying that that true thing that is showing in the terminal box is determined by a comparison that you're doing in the code. So the way you set that up, this is the easy part, writing out the string. This is the hard part, because doing a Boolean comparison is not normally something you do. I mean, I'm sure you do it, but out in the real world. But for the quiz, as far as quizzes go, there's not a lot of quiz ones that are gonna use booleans. But if anyone's gonna give you a boolean, it's gonna be Cooper. So what it's saying, if you want to get an output of true or false, you need to set this up as a Boolean comparison, which is basically an inequality, but in coding it's called a Boolean. So you could use 0 or 1. He uses 1, and we'll do both examples. He uses 1, and he's saying 1 is going to be set equal to whatever my city code is that the user enters. So if you think back to the repair class, we have a method here that returns the city code, right? So we need to get this city code, but we can't just say return, what's the method called? Return inside city code. It's wrong. You see, we get a red line there because class 3, this main class, it doesn't know what you're referring to. It thinks you're trying to call a method in here. So we need to use the object that we created for this class, repair type, to have access to this method, because this object, repair type, when it was created, it was going to perform all these functions. It was going to have the attribute of the repair type. It was going to have the attribute of inside city code. And that object has access to all these methods. So you're using repair type to access that method that has the code, that has the 1 or the 0, to show whether or not you're going to need to do this repair inside or outside. And I'm still, let's see, why am I still getting an error? Oh, I need a parenthesis. What? Parentheses, where you at? Okay, cool. Okay, so that's pretty much how you set up that last part there to get true or false. Because if you think about it, this inequality, or this Boolean, it's just a comparison. He's telling you in the hint your limitation. He's saying this thing is either 1 or 0. If it's 1, we're going to get true. If it's 0, we're going to get false, right? So, oh, okay, you know what? We need to get true, so this thing has to be 1. It wouldn't be 0. It wouldn't be 0. It has to be 1, because 1 is what is going to give us true, because when 1 is equal to 1, we'll get true. If I do 0, and if I do 0 equals, and then I get a return of 0, then it's true, but that's not how the program's supposed to work. You're supposed to get true when it is equal to 1. So when this return is equal to 1, you will get true. And that is it for this program. That's how that breaks down. This is definitely one of the most difficult parts, because it's, I mean, this thing here, the Boolean comparison will return a value of true or false. That's probably one of the hardest things to grasp, is that this whole piece of code here, it's going to return true or false. It's not going to return anything else, a number or whatever. It's just going to say true or false. And so that does it for, I don't know, there's this weird thing in the key where he has another system out print line. I have no idea what the purpose for this is. I think it's just the purpose of this is, oh god, this is what I really hated. If you notice, after repairs are inside the city true, there's a space. So there's a space in between that line and the press any key to continue line. So that's why he throws this in there, because this is what's creating that space, an empty system outline basically. So I'll just comment that out. This system dot out print is what creates the space between the previous line and press any key to continue line. Yeah, that's pretty tedious, but that's why that's there. I just noticed that right now. But yeah, I think I went pretty deep into this one, because I really broke down a lot of this stuff. I felt like I really had to, in order for most of you guys to get it, because this is a pretty, you know, it's a pretty tedious one to get, because you're doing a lot of stuff through objects, and not only are you doing things through objects, but you're calling methods and passing things, and then you have to use those things again to get the things back. Like here, you're sending that stuff so that the object second address can have it for itself, and then here you're like getting it back out. So it's like here you're putting it, you're setting it, you're sending it and sending and setting it to the object, and then here you're like trying to get that stuff you sent back out. So and then this part again, look over booleans. I would highly recommend that, especially if you have Cooper. He will definitely throw that at you as a big curveball. And this is how you would set up basically that kind of like inequality so that you can get a response of true or false. And since if being since being equal to 1 would give us true, that is why this needs to be 1, because if this returns 0, then we get false, because 1 equal to 0 is false. But if this were to return 1, 1 equals 1 is true, and that's the outcome that we want no matter what the user enters. So now we will actually go ahead and run this. This might take a moment, folks. There we go. I have a slow computer. This never used to be this slow. And I'm tired. Oh, come on, man. Don't do this to me, man. Oh, Lord. All right. Enter type of street repair. Uneven lanes. We want true. So I'm going to enter 1. Uneven lanes needs to be repaired. Addresses where repairs are needed. 987, 12189. Repairs are inside the city. True, because I entered 1. So here it returned 1. Equal to 1 is true. So now we'll run it with 0 as the input. All right, come on, Papa, let's go. All right, uneven lanes, and now I'm gonna get false. False, because that 0 was returned here through the object, and 1 equal to 0 is false. All right, guys, that is all I got for this one. This one is the most difficult, most tedious one, I believe. Definitely one of the ones you can learn a lot from, because you're doing a lot in this one, and not only that, you have 3 classes. So yeah, this is the last video I'll be making for quiz 1s. So hopefully 6 videos, or I think 5 is what I put up, is enough for you guys to get a hang of it on your own. That's why I made them, just because I think having that independent practice is very crucial. But I will definitely be doing workshops, and I will definitely be available during coding time to break down some of these quizzes a lot more, or to even practice new ones with you. But I appreciate you guys checking out all these videos. Share them and let people know that these videos are available online. That way, anyone who needs the help can get it. But yeah, this will most likely be my last video. If I have the time, I'll go ahead and make a couple more. But I think 5 should be enough for you guys to get the hang of it. So appreciate you guys checking out the videos. And I will see you guys around school and during coding time if you need some more help. So thank you very much, guys.